And let me talk a little bit about risk. Almost never is there a risk-free solution to anything. And anybody who tells you otherwise is probably giving you bad advice. We like to think of ourselves as business advisors first, lawyers second. Because what happens is that in your business, you encounter all sorts of issues that you need to kind of figure out. But our real objective is to try and help businesses grow and mature and develop. And so it starts with business mentoring and advisory. And then, of course, we can get very technical. We help people start their businesses, organize them, form them. We help them qualify to do business in other states or other countries as applicable. Marketing and sales is king. Marketing and sales is number one. You should prioritize marketing and sales above almost everything else. And that's really what our objective is. We provide resources either through the website or through the VBRC to empower people.
So welcome. We're going to have a discussion here. I'm Becky Guertler with the Veteran Business Resource Center. I want to introduce Ken Denos from the Acadia Law Group. They come on as a partner of ours and have been really phenomenal working with some of our veterans and giving some advice. And I hear really good things. So I wanted to sit down with Ken and have a discussion with you, turn some time over you to introduce yourself and whatever else you want to add to what I said.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Becky. And it has been a pleasure to work with the VBRC and work with veteran entrepreneurs. We have been in business now. We're now in our 27th year. So we've been doing this a long time.
That's great.
And we have worked with thousands of clients over that time period. A lot of businesses, mostly focused on Utah, but we handle businesses that are multi-state, and we also handle businesses that are multinational. So we like to help companies from the inception stage all the way through their growth cycle to becoming big businesses. So all through that life cycle, we like to be involved, and to the extent that we can provide value to them, we're helping them build something that is part of their dream. So we're excited about that, and we work with all shapes and sizes of entrepreneurs and all kinds of businesses.
That's awesome. So give me some areas of focus that you like to work on.
Well, I'd say the first thing that we like to emphasize is business mentoring and advisory. And I know that sounds a little sort of nebulous, but it really is. We like to think of ourselves as business advisors first, lawyers second. Because what happens is that in your business, you encounter all sorts of issues that you need to kind of figure out. And some of them involve legal issues and some of them don't, but you're not quite sure. And the interplay between that, I mean, we live in a society that it has tons of laws and statutes on our books, and we're not quite sure if what we're doing sort of involves some of those things. And so we tend to just approach it from a business perspective, and we sprinkle in bits of advice regarding the law, but our real objective is to try and help businesses grow and mature and develop. And so it starts with business mentoring and advisory. And then, of course, we can get very technical. We help people start their businesses, organize them, form them. We help them qualify to do business in other states or other countries as applicable. We help them set up all their foundational agreements, all of their really core agreements, such as, say, sales agreements, distribution agreements, supply agreements, their operating agreement for their company, for example. If they get to the point where they want to sell their business, we can help them with that. We help with merger and acquisition documents, disposition documents, that sort of thing. And of course, for their own personal standpoint, we also help with personal tax planning as well as estate planning and corporate tax planning as well. So it runs the whole gamut of all of the things that businesses incorporate. Now, we don't have a specialty, say, in some areas like intellectual property, but we have a network of lawyers that we refer things to, so that there's hardly going to be a question that we get asked that we don't either know the answer to or know how to find the answer pretty quickly for them.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I wanted to ask this question to you, if it's appropriate. What made you want to get involved with the veterans and the community here in Utah with the VBRC?
We have, for years, put ourselves out to provide services to different sectors of our community because we feel so intertwined with some of the members of our community, and we have a soft spot for certain groups, and veterans is one of them. We've seen how veterans are in need of this resource, and wow, once we got involved with the VBRC, the response has been overwhelming, and it's really fun to get involved with people who have such a passion for what they're trying to do, and they're so appreciative of some of the things that we could do for them. So We've only been involved with the VBRC for a relatively short period of time, but it's been wonderful. It's been intense, and it's been great to get all of the inquiries that we've been getting on a regular basis now.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I think that's a little bit that on my side. I'm like, oh, maybe we need to see how it goes, and so we're not overwhelming you guys. So I'm glad to hear the enthusiasm there. Talk to me about types of things that you've been able to help some of our businesses with.
Sure. So our business, some of these businesses come to us and they need some advice regarding how to set up a sales structure for them, for their company. Some of them come to us with questions about how to even set up their company. Maybe they need to know how to structure it. Maybe they have one owner. Maybe they have a dozen owners. And the thing is that the way that the advice that we're going to give for a solely owned company is far different than if you have a lot of owners, particularly if those other owners are not involved in the day-to-day running of the business, because then you have to separate the ownership from the management, and you have to make sure that the management is still responsible to the owners.
Yeah.
And so we help with all sorts of businesses, all shapes.
Awesome. Yeah, that was my next question. What types of clients? And I know that you worked with small businesses, large businesses, and everything in between. I know we had one of our situations where we've had somebody call and say, well, I want to start a business with my brother-in-law. We're just going to split it 50-50 and everything. And I said, take a minute. Let's talk about who you can talk to get the best setup for you. Because we can help them register their name and we kind of walk them through those types of things. But as far as structuring the company, we're not attorneys. And so it's good to have that to fall back on. So I really appreciate that. So let's talk about how people make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. So some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen, without disclosing and pointing fingers, but maybe some of the common mistakes that you've seen some business owners make that you're like, before you do this, talk to us or, get with somebody.
Well, first of all, a business is run and owned by human beings.
Yes.
And so human beings make mistakes. I make mistakes. And what we try and do is recognize when we've made those to try and correct them so we don't make them again. Well, one of the things that I see that's most common in any sector that we've experienced is the failure to have a proper operating agreement. So most small businesses, as you know, are organized as limited liability companies. And limited liability companies have what's called an operating agreement that governs how that business operates between the owners and the management, and basically how it goes going forward. Most businesses either don't have one, or they went to the internet and they got one, which sometimes is even worse.
Right.
And it complicates things.
Yes.
And then to compound that, our legislature in 2013 passed a very unfriendly statute. The one that we had before actually worked better. And what it does, it says that if you don't have a written operating agreement, or if your operating agreement is silent on the issue, then this statute is going to apply. That's not necessarily a bad thing until you look at the details of the statute. So for example, if you don't have a written operating agreement, the statute says that your company is now run by its members, by its owners. So it doesn't matter if you have a board or a management team. All key decisions have to be made by the owners.
Wow.
And not only that, if you don't have it specified in an operating agreement, the vote has to be unanimous. So think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
You've got 10 owners. You've got to go get 10 people to agree on every material thing that happens in your business, and it has to be unanimous every time. So you can imagine how unworkable that is. And that's just one example. And so one of the first things that we start with is try to help people get a proper operating agreement in place. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a big, big difference between having a single member operating agreement and a multi-member operating agreement, because you're dealing with a business partner when you have a multi-member operating agreement. Now, we happen to have templates on our website of the single member operating agreement and the multi-member operating agreement so that your viewers can actually get a sense of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable to have, where you have somebody say, how do I set this up? And you being able to say, hey, this is how you do it. Here's some help for you. That's really, really, really helpful. Oh, this is a good one. Okay. So we're talking about operating agreements. Let's talk about contract law for a minute. Okay. A lot of people don't know and realize that when they create a business, they're basically creating a new human being almost, right? It's a new entity, it's a new thing. Contracts, why are those so important?
Well, contracts are written contracts.
Yes.
Are super important because a business is only valuable if its operations and the cash flows associated with it are certain. Certainty is what drives the value of a business. What do we mean by that? Well, if I think that your business is going to generate profit in year 1, in year 2, in year 3, my degree of certainty in those cash flows increases my estimation of the value of your business. So how you create certainty, because that's what every business owner strives to do, is create certainty. And one of the ways you can do that is through long-term contracts. So if I have a key supplier and I really depend on that supplier, somebody looking into my business and assessing whether or not it has value is going to want to know, have I locked up that supplier under some sort of a contract?
Right.
So that a year from now, 2 years from now, that supplier can't just switch off. And so this is where contracts come in. And that's just one example, and you can probably think of a dozen types of examples.
Yeah.
So having that whole panoply of contracts for all of those different things that our business is involved in creates more certainty. More certainty means more value. More value means more wealth. That means everybody wins when you have certainty. Plus, the other thing is it avoids misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So you and I, we might agree to go into business together, and we may have sat down at this table and may have agreed a bunch of concepts. And it's very clear to us when we get up from this table and we walk away.
Right.
A year from now, it may be a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so forth and so on. And what happens is, without something written down, without a contract that memorializes that, even the most well-meaning people can have a misunderstanding. And misunderstandings sometimes lead to hard feelings and sometimes worse. And so having a written contract in place really helps also you work with your business partners better.
Yeah. No, I agree. We try to tell our folks, if you can avoid going to business with family because of the hard feelings, right? It's probably better to do that than do business with your family. So anyone can draft up a contract, right? So why use an attorney? Like why would you say, if someone were to say, well, why do I use an attorney to write up a contract? What would you say?
I would say, first of all, I would listen to Becky first and foremost, because what you said earlier was that you have people get together and they brainstorm about sort of things that they want, objectives. And that's what we do. So what we say to the client when they come to us is, why don't you jot down in your own vernacular, just do it in bullet point format, some of the things that you want out of this relationship that you're trying to create with this other person. And why don't you have them do the same thing? Put it all together and then send it to me. Now, that's not a contract, unfortunately.
Right.
All you've done is you've written down objectives and other things. But what that does for me is it allows me to put it into something that's legally binding. So now it's something that binds you and binds me together, so that now we've got all of those objectives and all those assumptions built into something that's written and that's binding, that makes sure that you perform and do the things that you say you're going to do, and makes me perform so that I'll do the things that I say I'm going to do.
Right. And then it also gives you the ability to hold accountability to each other.
It does.
Right. And so that makes it nice. So we do spend a lot of time here coaching on branding and sales. That's one of the things that's the biggest thing for a brand new company. I know you work with all sizes of companies. So let's talk about new companies for just a minute. So we'll talk about the other ones in a second. But new ones, like we have workshops, we have all kinds of information that we can throw at them. But sales is probably the one that keeps a business open. I loved what you said. Certainty drives the value of the business.
Yeah.
That's what you have to prove in order to pull in. Everyone thinks they're going to get started and they're going to find that venture capitalist that's going to give them the funding right away. And it's just not there, like the money tree doesn't exist. So what advice would you give regarding sales? Because there's some contract law that goes into that. There's some spoken stuff that goes into that. If I sell a hot dog to somebody, that's a contract. I say, I'll give you a hot dog if you give me the dollar for the hot dog, right? So what would you say about sales function in a new and growing business?
Well, I give the same answer for a startup that I do for a business that's been around for 2 decades. Same answer. And that is that marketing and sales is king.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing and sales is number one. And so you should prioritize marketing and sales above almost everything else. And what I mean by that is that sales actually produces the revenue and the cash flow so that you can take care of all those other problems that entrepreneurs have to take care of. And you've talked to so many of them, and They have to wear a lot of different hats.
Yes.
They're head of HR when they first get started, right? They're head of sales and marketing. They're head of accounting, possibly, because they're keeping it on a spreadsheet or they're doing whatever.
Yeah.
But sales is the thing that pays for the resources, provides the resources so that you can hire somebody to do the accounting, so that you can hire somebody to handle HR, so that you can pay your lawyer to do a few things for you, and so forth and so on. And it helps you build the infrastructure so that you can have a fully operating company. So it's got to start there. And a lot of people say, well, isn't that obvious that sales has to be number one? No, it's not actually. What I find a lot of times with an entrepreneur, especially one who's invented a really neat product or process, is they want to tinker with it. They want to develop it. They want to modify it because they want it to be perfect. And I get it. It's their expression. It's their baby. They want it to be right. It's a reflection on them. I totally understand that. But at some point, you've got to launch. You've got to hit the market because you're going to run out of cash. You may even have put a bunch of your own money into it. You may have brought investors into it, but eventually you're going to run out if you don't start generating sales.
Yeah.
You generate sales, all of a sudden, you're interesting to the banks. You're interesting to investors. You're interesting to your suppliers and to your sales distribution channels. So you become a much more interesting company when you're developing sales.
Yeah. And that's showing that you're proving your concept, right?
Indeed.
So we do teach a lot about this in our classes as well as having what we call a bail team. And I'm not talking about criminal bail, just so everyone's clear. We're talking about banker, accountant, insurance, and legal, and having somebody in that role to help you because, as you said, entrepreneurs have to wear all the hats, but they don't have all the expertise for all those hats sometimes. And so having somebody on your bail team, and sometimes that's someone that can help with marketing. Sometimes it's someone that helps with social media, whatever. So bail team. As we're looking at all of the things that people can do, right? How easy is it for someone to destroy their relationship with their customer based off of one bad experience or maybe they spout off online on something? What does that do to reputation, and how hard is that to repair?
It is a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's increasingly a challenge as customers are more and more empowered by online platforms to be able to rate and to be able to, in some cases, anonymously rate the product or service that they've received. And so you've got to be vigilant about that. And there are services that you can hire to help you to address some of those concerns. So you can have somebody go in and actually deal with that disaffected customer or client. You can also hire it to the extent that you've been unfairly targeted. Say, and it does happen actually, competitors will send via stealth people to come in and trash your product or your service.
Yeah.
And so there are services that you can hire to come in and help remove those things. But it takes time and it takes resources. Again, back to sales.
Right.
You've got to have the resources to be able to deal with threats like this.
Yeah. No, for sure. And the same thing with cybersecurity. You wouldn't just give your password out to everybody. You wouldn't post your social security number on the side of a bus and have it drive around town. Right?
That's right.
You want to protect your business. So ways to do that, ways to keep yourself protected is good. I know you guys have a checklist that you go down. You want to talk about what your 10-point checklist is when they're setting for sales
I
distribution?
won't go through the whole 10-point checklist. I'll just let the viewers know that it's on our website. So every time that we get approached by a client and we want to help them develop a distribution or sales agreement, we go through a 10-point checklist that helps them identify the key issues that they have to decide. They're not legal issues, they're commercial issues, business issues. And of course, we're going to be there and we're going to provide our advice.
Right.
But it goes right down and make sure that you address each and every one of them so that when I take the pen and I start drafting up that agreement, all of those things have been decided. It makes it really easy. And by the way, it cuts down on the bill that the client has to pay. And that's really what our objective is. We provide resources either through the website or through the VBRC to empower people so that they feel empowered to at least start doing some of those things. They can get them to a point, they can bring them to us, we can help them finish them. And so it's really just trying to give them tools so that they can grow their business and do things, sometimes without us, but many times with us.
Yeah, which is always good, I think. So protecting, we're going to go back to protection, patent protection, idea protection, design protection. how do you know, like, how does somebody know what to do and where do they get started?
Well, so if you have something that you think is unique, whether it's a process or it's a product, a design that you come up with that nobody's ever done before, it might be protectable and you should look into that. But let me give a caveat to that.
This.
A lot of people prioritize patents over other things in your company. And remember what I said earlier, marketing and sales is king. And so what I tell people, and this might sound a little surprising to some of your viewers, is that if you're faced with finite resources as an entrepreneur, and if you can decide whether to protect your product with a patent or to get marketing and sales going, I'm going to argue in favor of marketing sales every single time. That doesn't mean that I don't think you ought to protect your product. You should, but you need to have resources to do that. Let me give an example. If you go and get a patent, what have you actually got? Well, what you've got is you've got the right to sue somebody who infringes on your product. So that means after you've paid the patent lawyer, after you've paid the patent application fee and you've done all that stuff, you find out that somebody's infringing, you've now got to go hire a patent litigator and go to court, and then you've got to pursue that. And that's going to take several years, and it could cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you may not even get a judgment at the end of the day. That's not a recipe for success in a small business because that is going to really drain your cash. Now, instead, if you prioritize sales and marketing, what happens is you can generate the resources that you can still pursue a patent strategy, but now you're doing it with resources. And there's some alternatives to that as well. So you can apply for a provisional patent, and that's only $150.
Yeah.
And most people who know enough about their product can actually go online and do it themselves. And what it does is it gives you protection for a full year while you're trying to figure some things out. And what inevitably happens is you typically will refine your product, and you'll probably have a different version in a year or two anyway. And so the patent that you were thinking about filing is actually obsolete by the time you really get the resources to get going. And so if you think about the shelf life of the average consumer product, it's less than 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you have a copycat that's going to come and copy your first product, well, they're barely going to get going before that thing gets superseded by something that's better. And hopefully that better thing has been engineered by you.
Right.
In other words, the best defense you have for your product is actually innovation more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk about that in our Strive program as well. So patents are expensive. That was my daughter had an invention and they kept pushing us due to provisional patent. And then I realized you can get whatever patent you want, but you've got to be able to afford to defend or prosecute in court, right?
That's right.
And so that if you have sometimes, and the one we saw actually not for us, but for somebody else, they had a big fat giant retailer that had tons of money and they were okay with drawing it out.
That's right.
Draining the resources of the little guy.
And that can be the strategy.
Yeah.
And so if you prioritize marketing and sales, and then you go back and use some of those resources to build a patent portfolio, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Then when the big, well-capitalized competitor comes in, the first thing that they do is they're going to look at your suite of patents, and they're going to decide whether it's better to crush you or cooperate with you. And the more protection you have around that, the more likely it is that they're going to try and strike a licensing agreement with you. And that really is the objective in patenting your product or service, is try to deter would-be competitors from trying to combat with you, but rather encourage them to just seek a reasonable licensing arrangement with you.
Oh, interesting.
So let's talk about patent portfolio.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go the patent route, you need to consider that you probably are going to have a bunch of patents for the same product. Why is that? Well, because every little change that you make to that product really is an entirely new patent in and of itself. Your competitors are going to know that.
Yes.
And the one thing that we tell our clients all the time is prepare to be copied if you're good. If you're good, the competitors are going to start coming out of the woodwork. So therefore, all those little changes that you make, you better have some protection for those if you're going to pursue the patent protection strategy, which means by the time you're done, you're going to have 8, 9, 10 In some cases, some companies have dozens of patents on the same product because they've made all of these really interesting changes
Yeah.
to it. And that what that does is increase the likelihood that you're going to have a licensing arrangement with someone who wants to copy you, as opposed to duking it out in court.
Yeah. No, that's great. That was interesting. The inside the mind of the lawyer of like, how do they look at a patent? And you gave both sides. You gave both sides of like, here's how we protect it. Then you're like, how do we crush them? And so I think it's good for businesses to understand that not everybody's going to be in your court. Not everybody's going to be in the Prince. Machiavelli's The Prince. It talks about the lukewarm supporters, right? That are saying, hey, we want to see you be successful. And then you jump off the cliff and everyone's standing at the cliff being like, see you later.
I'll say one last thing about protecting your company or your product. What I see actually more often than a patent, the necessity for a patent, is the necessity for protection of trade secrets. So I see that more often. What that means is you have a process of the way you make it, the way you distribute it, the way you market it, perhaps, that's not patentable, but it sure is giving you an advantage over your competition.
Yes.
So if you're a business owner, you need to take every step you possibly can to protect that. How you do that? Well, it starts with really strong NDA agreements. So employees, anybody who looks at your business is aware of your process. You need to have them sign a non-disclosure agreement so that at least you have something to enforce that. And then, of course, make sure in today's age of social media and everything's on the internet, make sure that that sort of thing is not in the public domain. Because if it's in the public domain, forget about it. Somebody's going to notice it and somebody's going to copy it. So you just need to take affirmative steps to protect those things. Chances are those things are going to be more valuable to your business than a patent will.
Right. And I want you to give a quick description and define what a non-disclosure agreement is for people that may not understand what that fully is.
A non-disclosure agreement is an agreement between two parties where each of them, usually it's a bilateral agreement, because you want to make sure what's binding on you is also binding on your counterparty. So you want to make sure that both of you are prohibited from disclosing any information you learn about each other. And you think to yourself, well, why would I be prohibited from disclosing anything I know about my counterparty? The reason why is your counterparty might be an investor, and your investor might have proprietary relationships with financing sources and banks and other things they want to protect, and they want to disclose those to you. Meanwhile, you have trade secrets. You have really interesting things that you do in your company that you want to disclose to them.
Yeah.
So what a mutual non-disclosure agreement does is it prohibits me from disclosing anything I learn about you, and prohibits you from disclosing anything you learn about me.
Yeah. And which is really important, especially when you have a product or service that is really unique, right?
The great thing about NDAs too is that courts routinely enforce NDAs over long periods of time. So I typically counsel clients to start with a 5-year term for their NDA. Sometimes they even go 10, but 5 years, a court will usually uphold that, just because trade secrets and proprietary information is typically stuff that the law will uphold.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a good one. I think a good question to ask you for folks that sometimes you know your product really, really well. So let's say we do have some farmers or ranchers, or we have somebody who really is just really into whatever they're doing. We have a guy that does fig tree farming. He's phenomenal at it. That's what they know, and they don't want to deal with the mumbo jumbo of everything else, right? They're like, this hat I don't want to wear, that hat I don't want to wear. And sometimes people don't know they don't know what they don't know. When you get into a situation where you're dealing with where you might need an NDA, something that's really helpful is helping people know how to negotiate, which is what an attorney can do on your behalf. What's your top, like if you have a business owner brand new starting out, they've got a great idea, you can see that it's going to be phenomenal for them. How do you get them ready to negotiate for something for their business? Because that can kill a business. Sometimes even just as bad as not having sales, right? So they walk out and they're like, I just gave away my whole business.
Well, a couple things. It starts with knowledge. So one of the first things we do when we get approached by an entrepreneur that has something really neat that they've developed and they want to take it to market, they want to do something with it, they want to wrap a business around it, but they don't know what they don't know, as you rightly say.
Yes.
So the first thing we try and do is we try and empower them with knowledge. And so we try and talk about the sector they're in, the possible competitors that they'll have, the kinds of growth pains that they'll have in trying to grow the business, to try and finance the business, to try and locate the business, to expand the business into other states and other jurisdictions. So we'll walk them through that and give them as much knowledge as they possibly can so that now they're empowered. They're empowered to kind of see what the options are and so that they can assess the risks. And let me talk a little bit about risk.
Yes, that was my next question.
Almost never is there a risk-free solution to anything. And anybody who tells you otherwise is probably giving you bad advice.
Right.
There are many lawyers who fall into the trap of trying to protect their clients from all risk. Not possible. Instead, what we do is we help them assess risk, a bunch of risky alternatives. So here's what the business owner faces every single day. They face 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. Each one of them have their own risk profile. Not one of them are risk-free. And what our job is to educate them about the risks of each decision that they want to make so that they make the most educated choice that they can, understanding the risks they're about to undertake by going this direction or that direction. So really, assessment of risk, empowerment with knowledge, those are the fundamental concepts that we try and start from the very beginning to try and work with our entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I've seen some be like, okay, so attorney, what do I do? Do you ever get that question? Like, tell me what to do. Like, how do you answer that question for somebody?
I usually ask questions.
Yes.
So instead of telling them what to do, I usually elicit more information from them. And then what'll happen is in the course of the conversation, they'll know what to do
They have the answer.
because they'll have the answer. What they need to have is more information because they're just not sure. Where is that surface I'm about to put my foot onto because I can't see it?
Yeah.
And so we help them see it so that now they can take a step forward and they understand what the lay of the land is.
Yeah, I think that's I started doing that kind of with my kids, and they're saying, "Hey, I want to do this. Can I do this?" I'll be like, "That depends. I need more information." So, I think that's key here. And there are resources that we have access to through the University of Utah, just so you know, that they can help with some of that research, especially when they're looking at trademark and patent. They can help do a lot of that research so that they have a lot of the work done before they come to your door. Which I want to go back to because you made this point earlier that it saves them money if they do some of this work beforehand, and if they know what to do, if they know what the work they should do before they get to your phone or your email. Give us some good tips and tricks on being prepared to meet with an attorney, because not everybody shows up prepared, and then it wastes time for the business owner.
First of all, we are working on our own website to add more and more resources, such as the checklist I just identified, so that people can be prepared. But you don't need to just go to our website. You can go out there, and there's probably at least pointers that people can give you so that you can begin to think about the concepts of what you're trying to achieve so that at least you've jotted down some things in your mind before you come see me.
Mhm.
Some people, they do come and see me with a completely blank sheet. They don't even know where to start, and that's okay. We are happy to have them. But those who come with us armed with a little bit of information find that the meeting goes much, much better and that we don't need to meet 2 or 3 or 4 times. We can meet only once and we can probably get the gist of what they want to accomplish and we can put something together in short order for them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Saves time for them, saves time for you. It just makes it nice. Cool. Awesome. I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to share? Anything that we didn't cover?
Well, what I would say is that we're constantly adding more information and resources. We are coming to all the VBRC events because we want to make sure that veteran entrepreneurs know who we are and know that they can reach out to us. So if you have a question about anything that's business related, not just legal, but business related, give us a call. We'd love to help.
Yeah. So tell me how they find you.
Okay, acadialawgroup.com. You can go to our website or you can dial our main line at 801-816-2500.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you're interested in getting into business with us and working with the VBRC, Again, we help our veterans, active duty, reserve guard, and military spouses with all their entrepreneurial needs in Utah. And we love to kick ideas around. We also love to help see you be successful. So come check us out. You can network with Ken and his team at our networking events coming up.
Great. Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, thank you.